as portrayed in that 4th century. Next slide, Jim. Christ Pantocrator. And this is a zoom in of a much larger image. I want you to notice in particular the eyes. Anything strike you as strange? If you look at the right and left sides of the face, you'll note that one side looks a little bruised and beaten, a little human. And the other is this intentionally improved image. It's an attempt to depict the humanity and the divinity of Christ in one image. Again, Christ of faith or Jesus of history? What do you think? All those in favor of Jesus of history? Oh, you thought you were going to get to sit. No, I'm serious. I want to see hands. Jesus of history. All right. Christ of faith. Yeah, there's a little bit of Jesus of history, but frankly, look at where this image is originating, Mount Sinai, Egypt. The fact that Jesus looks like a Palestinian Jew, well, he doesn't really. He looks like an Egyptian. This is a depiction of the Christ of faith. Next slide, Jim. Then we move to the Celtic Church, a very broad definition of the Celtic Church. On the left, we have the Book of Kells in Ireland, 8th century. Do you notice anything strange about the image of Jesus? What's with the red facial hair? Right? I'm Scots-Irish. I have a lot of family members who have that going on. Dark hair, dark eyes, red beard. It's the reason my brother never grew one. The Jesus on the right comes from a stained glass in Rhine Abbey, circa 1070. And this is a Jesus who looks very much like the individuals in the nobility of that era. Carefully bound hair, carefully coiffed beard. Jesus of history or Christ of faith? All those in favor, Jesus of history, Christ of faith. More so, particularly if you knew that the depiction of the stained glass window, many believe, is an attempt to merge the features of Jesus with an image of the Lion of Judah. It's a wonderful image for a warrior culture, isn't it? So we have this understanding. It's not an historic image of Jesus. It's not intended to be. But it's also beginning to do something else. It's beginning to very strongly reflect the surrounding culture. You see, now we've moved well beyond a historic Jesus, and Jesus is starting to look like us, whoever us is at the time. Next slide, Jim. Move into the Middle Ages, Italy circa 1230 on the left, Macedonia 1262 on the right. You notice anything interesting about those two images? Different countries, different media. The one on the left is a tapestry, the one on the right is a painting. Do you see similarities? I played around at one point with an effect where we actually merged those two images. And what's interesting is that the faces, the lines of the face, the angle of the head, we're starting to get a stylized Jesus now. Jesus looks a certain way. Jesus is recognizable because, well, he has a particular set of features: beard, flowing hair, and that sort of wise and patient expression. If this image of Jesus ran up against that modern image of the laughing Christ, can you imagine? Which one of those is Jesus? Again, understand there's a cultural reality here. Jim? And then we get to the Renaissance. And we begin to have some wonderful flights of fantasy. We have Bouts in the center, and a Jesus who looks, well, a little bit like a Dutch or a German merchant. It's a little hard to tell. Is he presiding over the sacrament of the Eucharist or a table in a counting house? You can take this image and line it up against images of nobility of the day. And the only reason that you know it's Jesus is that golden chalice with the host in front of him. Take that away, and he could be any merchant. You have in the lower left Michelangelo and his very perfect Jesus. Ivory, polished to a luster, perfect features, perfect hair. Beard is carefully coiffed. This Jesus could walk into any salon in the Renaissance and nobody would bat an eye. He'd fit right in. And then we have Raphael. And Raphael's moving a step further here. You'll notice that we begin to have that angelic glow surrounding Jesus. How can you pick Jesus out in a Renaissance painting? Well, he glows. He has that background aura, almost always. These images, Christ of faith or Jesus of history? Christ of faith. Jim? And then Christ in the modern era. You have on the far left Solomon, the head of Christ, that I affectionately call Swedish Jesus. It's that long, flowing blonde hair. How many of y'all grew up in a church where there was a picture like this? Right? There are generations of children who think Jesus looks just like this. And the other two very common images are both Hoffman, ahead of Christ, and then Christ in Gethsemane. How many of you grew up with Hoffman's Christ? Yeah. My home church right now has the Jesus kneeling at Gethsemane painting behind the altar. And on a fairly regular basis, I get in trouble because I like to put my PowerPoint screen there. And you can't block the image of Jesus. I said, well, now wait a minute, is Jesus here even if the picture is hidden? And you know, there's always a pause. Because that's Jesus. And on one hand, they know that they're not supposed to reverence an icon, an image, that's idolatry. But on the other hand, this is the Jesus they've grown up with. This is the way they picture him. And by the way, I pointed out to Jim Smarkle that if Jesus in Gethsemane stood, he'd be 7'6". Perhaps evidence that Jesus was a tall man. You see, Jesus is now starting to take on kind of a larger-than-life reality. Jesus of history, Christ of faith. Jim? Finally, we move into the realm of motion pictures. Cecil B. DeMille, King of Kings. And I want to play this clip without comment, and I want you to be considering how DeMille handles this Jesus. Go ahead, Jim. What stood out in that image of Jesus? Looked a little old for 33, didn't he? Hollywood didn't have a lot of young, good-looking actors then. Yeah, if we were casting Jesus today, who would we cast? What else did you notice? Glowing everywhere. Did you look to see if his feet were on the ground? Because I did the first time I saw this clip. There was that kind of knee-jerk, okay, no, it's not the Transfiguration, just checking. Very formal Jesus who moves only. Now, some of that is the motion picture technique of the time. Quick actions weren't easily captured. But yes, Jesus is sort of stiff and formal, isn't he? Does it come as something as a shock at the end when he's hugged? Just a little bit, doesn't it? It feels a little bit like, don't get Jesus dirty. Don't mess with the glow. As we move into this era of motion pictures, we're very much in the realm of the Christ of faith. But the quest for the historic Jesus, that quest is going on in the background of these pictures. And I want you to keep that in mind. Jim? Salvador Dali on the left, Pablo Picasso on the right, both painting the crucifixion. We're starting to ask questions now, at least in the world of art. We're starting to ask, what does it really mean that God dies on the cross?